Welcome to the Gentleman's Guide to Gaming, and the history of the They Came From RPGs. Mainly, I'm making this video to show something off, because I'm very, very pleased with it. Not just it, them. Way back when, in the dawn of time, in fact, the dawn of this YouTube channel, way back about 2010, 2011, I think. So this channel had been going a year or two. I was playing a video game by the name of XCOM Terror from the Deep. There was a Let's Play of it on this channel. And what I would do is I would name the Aquanauts, the characters in that Let's Play, after subscribers to this channel, people who commented, who wanted their character to appear in the game, and they would inevitably die because there was a bug in the game that prevented me from finishing it. There were over 100 parts to that Let's Play. And it went on and on and on. It really developed in me a fascination of playing an underwater special forces RPG. And so I started developing this They Came From Beneath the Sea RPG, which mixed B-movies with XCOM Terror from the Deep cosmic horror. It was terrible. I playtested it at the UK Games Expo. It wasn't good. There may even be a recap video of that on this channel somewhere. And yeah, it really knocked the wind out of my sails. For some godforsaken reason, I decided I would use an adaptation of the Leading Edge Games rules, I think, for the Aliens RPG, which is about as clunky and cumbersome as you can get, because I was sure that this had to be a combat-heavy game. Very dry, very serious. And I worked with some people on coming up with concepts for the different private military companies around the world that were combating the alien threat. But it didn't take off. It wasn't a game that was ever going to sustain itself. Now, soon after that, I ran a game of All Flesh Must Be Eaten for my local gaming club, except it was the Halloween special, which is where we all got to run lots of horror one-offs at the club. We did like a full day of gaming, and I ran All Flesh Must Be Dark Place, set in Garth Marenghi's Dark Place, which some of you are going to be familiar with. It's a knockoff of a B-movie, TV show, and very funny. And each player was playing a character from Garth Marenghi's Dark Place when Dark Place Hospital was overrun with zombies. So they had their character sheet, they had an illustration of the character that I had rendered, and every character had quotes on their sheet that they spoke in the show. Now, if a player spoke that quote during the course of the game at an appropriate or entertaining time, they would gain additional dice. And it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. People liked that a lot. Around that time, I was also running DC Heroes, first edition, which is on the shelf somewhere near me. And I decided, because I wanted to run a real Silver Age, 1960s, 70s camp superhero game, that I would make various POW and ZAP and KAPOW cutouts that would go in the middle of the table, and there was a limited number of them, and you could tap them to make your attacks essentially go critical. And you could unlock more by achieving certain things in the game. All of these things acted independently of each other. And then I came to a startling conclusion. What if I blended all of this together? What if I made a B-movie sci-fi parody game, and you could play cards with quips on that sound like one-liners from cheap movies, badly delivered, that would give you bonuses to your dice roll. And thus was born They Came From Beneath the Sea. Now, I was a fan of 1950s B-movies and horror for a very long time before I made this. I used to watch black and white VHS recordings from my uncle. He recorded loads of sort of public access stuff from a satellite dish. He basically could tune into American TV all the way over here in the UK and would just record video after video of all this low-rent public domain movies, and I would just watch loads of them. And I was, of course, when I was that young, I was unaware of the whole Red Scare element, but I really loved the bad costumes, the bad acting. It was a pretty typical story each time. Aliens invade a coastal town because, of course, the Russians are invading from the sea. There's a military facility that's hidden in the coastal town. That's why they're attacking. No one in the local area knows about it. The sheriff, the military, and the scientists have to come together to develop a super weapon and beat the aliens away. And then usually a plucky housewife delivers the killing blow. That basically becomes the premise for most They Came From Beneath the Sea games. And with the help of Rich Thomas, the creative director at Onyx Path Publishing, we pushed it even further into that MST3K area of parody. So I was able to pull from all kinds of B-movies of the era elements that I wanted reflected in the game. So we have even cinematics that enable you to change things, that, insert missing reels, delete scenes, that kind of thing. Kill an extra who's just cycling by instead of yourself if you play the right cinematic at the right time. But I was always aware that sci-fi, especially sci-fi within that 50s, 60s frame, was a bit of a limited scope. And I think the audience agreed, which is probably why They Came From Beyond the Grave, the next one, did a lot better. They Came From Beyond the Grave is our horror They Came From, based on the works of Hammer Horror, Amicus, Roger Corman, lots of monster movies from the 60s to the 80s. They Came From Beyond the Grave. It's a wonderful book, wonderful RPG, and I felt it's really where They Came From came into its own. I think Beneath the Sea is a wonderful game, I love it, but Beyond the Grave is where we really refined the idea of what you're doing, where you are playing characters not just in the 1970s, but also their predecessors in the 19th century, because I was a big fan, and I still am, of horror anthology movies, like the sort of Tales from the Crypt style Asylum, where you end up seeing characters in your protagonist's past, or their characters in history or something like that, their ancestors. And so there's got this almost time jump element to this game, while still using quips and archetypes and the parts of They Came From people really love. And Beyond the Grave did better than Beneath the Sea, because I think horror is such a broad church. It's a very popular concept, and I'm very pleased it did so well. Because it did so well, we were able to fund and ultimately make a rather chunky source book, which stands on its own as maybe my favourite They Came From. Often it is. They Came From Camp Murder Lake, which, despite its title, well, it's all about slasher movies, 1970s and 80s slasher movies. Friday the 13th, Sleepaway Camp, Halloween, Nightmare on Elm Street, you name it, it's in there. Even Hellraiser gets a shout. And you've got monsters in all of these games that are based on the movies that they're based on. So what I mean by that, all of the They Came From games are cinematic in nature. They are based on certain movies and certain movie genres. And horror, as I mentioned, is a very broad church, which is why we were able to expand it with an entire slasher supplement. And Camp Murder Lake, again, very popular. Maybe my favourite They Came From book. I'm not sure, but it was such fun to write. It was a great deal of fun to write. There's a lot of fun, there's a lot of sex, there's a lot of attitude in there, blood, guts, boobs, and more. And I think Camp Murder Lake is a huge amount of fun. But here's the thing. I was asked by Rich, where do we see the game going after we do horror? And we were throwing around various genres at each other. And eventually, we came down to espionage, because I love a spy film. And we received a pitch at the same time as I was mulling over fantasy movies. Now, fantasy, of course, is another very broad genre. Espionage is quite focused. So we'll look at espionage first, because arrived today, as of the time of recording, the traditionally printed version of They Came From Classified. Now, They Came From Classified may actually be next to Camp Murder Lake. It's a tight run thing. I love the layout of this book. I love the poster art. I love the dossiers of all the villains, the masterminds, and their hench people. I love the writing of it, the tone of it, the innuendo. It is just stunning. Just a stunning book. And the team who worked on it did such a fantastic job. It really channels everything from Bond to Bourne. It has John le Carré influences, it has Carry On Spying, it has Jason King and Austin Powers. It's got all of that. I mentioned Top Secret in a recent video. This, They Came From Classified, for me, is the perfect way to emulate a spy feature. You can make it as cold and civil service-like, like Slow Horses, or as explosive and Mission Impossible-like as you want. They Came From Classified has it all, with the central inspiration being The Avengers, John Steen and Emma Peel, or Kathy Gale if you prefer, or Tara King, but no one prefers that. So They Came From Classified really was so much fun to make, and as Michele Masala had pitched a fantasy genre for They Came From, and I was very keen to work on one as well, along came another book that just arrived, They Came From the Cyclops' Cave. Now, I mentioned fantasy as very broad, where our espionage game, They Came From Classified, kind of spans 1960s to 80s. Spy features tend to follow the same kind of plot. You know, they're either surveillance, assassinations, government secrets, that kind of thing. It's almost a natural successor to Beneath the Sea. Cyclops' Cave covers everything, and it is a decent-sized book. Covers everything from 1920s and 30s silent fantasy movies, everything like Sinbad and The Odyssey and Trials of the Champions and so on. Clash of the Titans, I should say. Trial of the Champions is a fighting fantasy book, all the way through to Sword and Sorcery. So it has the Sword and the Sorcerer, Krull, Hawk the Slayer, Xena Warrior Princess is likewise in here. It's not all Greek, despite the Cyclops on the front. Far from it. This book contains such a wealth of inspiration, and again, just like the other They Came From, the team did a sterling job with it. So, where does that leave us? Well, that isn't all. Even though those are the They Came From books you can get so far, there are more coming. We have They Came From the Danger Zone, which expands They Came From Classified purely into action movie and martial arts movie territory. We have They Came From Witchford Academy, which expands Cyclops' Cave into the magical school genre. And this is the most exciting one for me, They Came From the RPG Anthology. And I will link all of these things, the ones that are available, to either order or pre-order below. They Came From the RPG Anthology has a grand total of, I think, 11 different games in it. It is the biggest They Came From book yet, and it has 11 different genres. Let's see how well I can remember them. We got They Came From Cowboys Gulch for westerns. They Came From the Mean Streets for noir. We've got They Came From Bridgeton Rectory for sort of period drama, costume drama. We've got They Came From the Bard's Quill for Shakespeare. We have They Came From the Interstellar Starship, I'm not drunk, which is sci-fi, space opera. And then, through the course of the Kickstarter, we funded They Came From the Billiard Room with the Candlestick, Murder Mysteries. I wrote that one. I had a lot of fun with that. We have They Came From the High Octane Apocalypse, which is our Mad Max post-apocalyptic games. We have with it They Came From... They Came From Beneath Capes and Cowls, which are superheroes. They Came From Under the Skull and Crossbones, pirate and adventure movies. We have They Came From the Meticulously Planned Bank Job, which is heist movies and gangster movies. And then we have They Came From the Steel Dragon Fighting Tournament, which is fighting games and even more martial arts movies. So, there's a lot of They Came From to look forward to. There is a lot. It may actually be the most prolific Onyx Path game line, which I know is saying a lot, because Scion, we've released a lot of books for Scion as well, but there's a lot out there for They Came From, and there's a lot coming for They Came From too. Certainly it is the game line I've worked on where I don't think my name has been in more books for one series, maybe Vampire, but probably not. And that's because as the original designer for They Came From, not that I just let other people do it and I stick my name in it, but I've either been a developer or co-developer or an author on every single book for They Came From. So, I hope you have played They Came From, and what I'd like to hear from you is a couple of things. One, have you played They Came From? Two, if not, what might interest you? And three, what genres would you like to see in the future for They Came From? I often hear people complain. I don't often hear people complain about They Came From, but when people complain about They Came From, it tends to be that they don't want to play a comedy RPG, and I completely get that. The thing I think some people seem to miss is They Came From can be played as straight and deadpan, as seriously as you choose. There's a wonderful actual play. The very first actual play I ran for Red Moon Role Playing was They Came From Beneath the Sea, and it's played almost entirely straight. It's a Lovecraftian horror, creepy Innsmouth-like town in Alabama, and things are very unsettling. The characters are avatars of the great old ones, and when they use cinematics, it is basically godlike powers stepping in to preserve them. So very little humour at all, and a good example of how They Came From can be played straight. So I really encourage people, anyone who is a fan of any of these game genres or movie genres or video game genres, check They Came From out. You now have a lot of choices, and I think you will find something you like. I would love for They Came From to do better. So if you haven't picked up a copy of a They Came From game yet, I'm reliably assured right now that there should be a sale. So do click on the links below. You should be able to find something with money off. And if you can't, go for a PDF of They Came From the RPG Anthology. That's 11 games in one book. So you are more than getting your money's worth from it. With all that said, thank you very much for watching. I do hope you continue to support the They Came From line, and if you just want to support me without supporting the They Came From RPGs, head on over to my Patreon, patreon.com/Matthew Dawkins, and feel free to give me a low level of support to show you care. Thank you very much for watching.